What's up, everyone? You're here with Luminol on the Wall. I'm Bevy.
And I'm Becky.
And hey, sister.
Yes. Hello there, preggers.
God, you and Craig both calling me preggers.
I mean, you're just so pregnant.
I am so pregnant.
Yeah, you're like 3 weeks away from your due date.
Yeah. It was my last day of work.
Celebrate good times. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Good times. That's what it is. No, it is. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But I think you had somebody ask me, like, how's your sister doing? Who listens to the podcast. And I'll tell you, I am struggle busing it a little bit. Stairs are ridiculously challenging right now, honestly. I took one step up a stair, and I was like to Craig, I'm like, give me your hand. Just walking up our house. I'm like, please.
I need help.
You know, after a long day, I was like, that's what I need right now. It's like
some
just
literal support.
Take some weight off of my legs for me.
Yeah.
But I am overall doing well.
Yeah.
But I will say the third trimester pregnancy, it hits a little bit different. You're just ready for it to be done.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. So, it's a little hard watching you. I'm not going to lie. Because, like, you don't want to see someone you love kind of just struggle busing, as you said, everywhere.
Yes.
And just watching you do things, I'm like, it just looks so tough right now.
I know.
Like, I could help her.
Yeah.
I did push your couch in for you today, like where you're sitting.
Yeah. You're going to have to do that every time, though.
That's
pretty
right.
much.
Got you a blanket.
You got me a blanket.
Coffee.
Yeah. Honestly.
You know?
I'm going to miss this treatment, honestly.
Yeah. As soon as that baby's out, it's like, do it yourself, Bev. You have no excuse.
But I'll feel better. So, anyways, that's the update. We're excited for the little nugget to come into this world.
Yeah, all of us.
/ scared to death to give birth.
Yeah, Bev says she's like, oh, I'm just like so scared because of the pain. Then like an hour later, is it like weird that I just like want to do it like just completely natural?
Yeah,
like,
that's just me. Like, it would be lovely to do that, but you know what? Everything I've heard is like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Like, if you don't need to,
don't put yourself through it.
Yeah, it's like, I think everyone wants to be that person that will just be like, I had a natural birth and I enjoyed it and it was so wonderful and it changed me as a woman. But
yeah,
I asked some lady who had a baby. I was like, what are the labor pains feeling like? Like, is it like a really bad period cramp? She's like, oh, like, no. It's so much worse. And then she was like, it starts off that way. I'll say that. But no.
And it just escalates pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Or not.
Depending on. But yeah, she was like, it's way worse. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, don't have your hopes up for that.
Epidural it is. Anyways, what's new with you, sister?
What is new? Oh, I mean, I already told you, but just crushed my spin class.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Getting back into it. I love it.
Yeah, it was really fun. I did it with a friend. Shout out to Marcy.
Nice. Go Mars.
I feel like anyone who listens can be like, who is this Marcy character?
Yeah, we talk about her enough.
Yeah. But yeah, we had a lot of fun. It was like not my personal best, but like I haven't been doing it as frequent as other times. And so when I hit that number, I was like, holy fuck, I did great.
I'm the bomb.com, baby.
Like, even though I partially left my soul on that bike.
I'm feeling myself.
Yeah.
Feeling myself.
You leave?
Feeling myself. Shout out to Nikki. We love that song.
Yeah.
And Beyonce.
Yeah. Queen B.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty much all that's new with me. Just, living my normal life, working, podcasting, working out, warhammering. That's about it. And walking my dog.
Yeah. So update on the Udi question on Instagram. To Udi or to not to Udi, or only if you're too cold? Do you know the ratio this time? Because when I put my vote in, it was 50-50 for yes and only when I'm really cold.
That sounds like it's really positive. I actually can't remember like the official like voting.
Right.
But it seems pretty positive.
For the Udi.
Yeah.
People
so
Udi.
Pro Udi.
Pro Udi.
Pro
Love
Udi.
It.
Yeah. Here's me and my sponsorships. Give me one, Udi. I want a sponsorship.
There's probably so many brands. Like, we went upstairs after and Jamie was like, isn't it a Snuggie? I'm like, maybe.
You don't know which one you got me? What if I wanted a second one just like it?
Honestly, they're pretty cheap on Amazon.
Well,
I could make it work.
okay.
Anyways, enough about us.
Enough about us.
Enough about us. Give us the 411 on this case, Beck.
Ooh, well, first question. Do you know where Macedonia is? And don't look at the script, please.
Well, I already did, so.
Okay, well, do you remember?
Greece.
Close.
Shit.
Yeah, it's like bordering Greece. And a couple other places. So for anyone who doesn't know, Macedonia, it borders Bulgaria, Serbia, Greece, and Albania.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So it's nice. Now, our case today is going to take us to a cute, quaint little town called Kicevo. Now, I'm going to apologize because I'm pretty sure I have all these names and the enunciations correct. I've done a good amount of research, but just to forewarn anyone, if I get it a little wrong, I'm just so sorry.
And if you're local to Kicevo, please, correct us.
Yeah.
Right? Just tell us.
Just don't be angry with me.
Yeah.
That's all. Feel free to correct us,
Becky
but don't
can't
be
take
angry.
It.
I tried so hard, you know? So.
Just a little bit of a positive criticism.
Yeah, oh my God, you guys, I loved your podcast. You were so close to saying it right, but you fucked it up.
Oh. Yeah.
Next time I talk about Macedonia and all those people, I will definitely say everything correctly.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I was looking at little pictures of Kicevo and Bev. It reminds me of Banff in the 80s and 90s, which I know you were very little. And so was I, actually, for that matter. But
you're
I also looked at pictures.
Older than me.
But I also
Bev, I know you were little. It's Becky, we couldn't even fucking talk.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, well,
I could say polka dots.
You could say polka dots. Anyway, so it was Banff in the 80s and the 90s, sure.
Yes.
Quaint. Small.
Yeah, very cute. Not super traveling and lots of tourists and stuff like that. So it's old school Banff when the locals really, really loved it. It was quiet. Anyways, enough about Banff and olden 80s.
She digresses.
Yes, I did. Well, Kicevo is surrounded by the slopes of Mount Bistra, and it is located 112 kilometers away from the capital of Macedonia, called Skopje, in case you wanted to know some geographical information, Bev.
It's always good. I really don't know my geography very well, so,
Not helpful.
Well,
really?
This is helpful.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Okay, good.
I like it.
Yeah. It's about a bunch of women in their 60s and 70s who go missing in Kicevo.
Okay.
And some of their disappearances aren't taken very seriously.
They're yeah, you're past your prime. Who gives a fuck about you? I'm kidding, everyone.
Of course.
But kind of interesting that it's not taken seriously. It reminds me of the Gilgo murders, how prostitutes or sex workers, their disappearances, not taken seriously.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. The only difference between these older women, besides their age, and the Gilgo beach murders and disappearances, is that these women were janitors, not prostitutes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So, janitors, they're very valuable in today's society. Any society. Today, 10 years ago, anytime.
Craig was a janitor when I met him.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
At the gym. Mm-hmm. Cute old janitor Craig.
Okay, so a bunch of women are going missing, all with similar, age demographic and jobs. So are we talking a serial killer here, Becky?
I mean, yeah, we are. Okay?
Yeah, you're I can't even mess around.
I can't even. You kind of went through that really well. Yes, it is a serial killer. However, who is the serial killer? I think your jaw will hit the floor.
Okay.
Because when I found out, I was fucking shocked.
Stunned into oblivion.
Yes. Yes. So let's get into it, okay?
All right.
So our case is taking us back to November 16th, 2004. A call came into the Kicevo Police Department from a 41-year-old woman named Kenarika Samanoska. She reported that her 64-year-old mother, Mitra Simanoska, was missing. She had gone to the market earlier that day, but had not returned home. Initially, Kenarika wasn't too worried, maybe her mom had decided to run other errands while out, or maybe see some of her friends. But after a while, Kenarika was worried and called the police. The police went to Mitra and Kenarika's home to look around, and based on what they saw, they could confirm that, Mitra had not returned home from the market. I mean, they already knew that because of Kennerika. Yeah. But they just, like, I guess had to see it from the
she
cell.
wasn't home.
Yeah, like, okay, you're not just lying to us.
No, she's not here. Yeah, oh, look at that.
Now, after they searched the house, like, really vaguely, they didn't do anything else after that initial search. Now, eventually days went by with no sign from Mitra, and Kennerika was worried about her mother, but the police seemed to be unfazed still, and they believed Mitra had disappeared by choice.
Of course, she's a mature woman. Like, she can do what she wants.
She could if she wanted to. Yeah. When Kennerika voiced her disappointment to the police, they basically asked for her to pay them to look further into her disappearance.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're like, give us some money and maybe we'll do our job. Ridiculous.
You know what's interesting about that, though, is in a lot of other countries, aside from Canada, like, police can be bribed and often are.
Oh, I'm sure there's police here that are bribed, too.
Oh, I'm sure. But, like, what I mean is, like, sometimes in other countries, like, there's not as many resources that go into, like, the civil servant of, like, a police officer, right? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes police officers can be very corrupt and make their own money in that way. Like, when I was in school, we learned a lot about it. And it's actually pretty, like, fucked up. So I'm not saying that this is the case in this one, but I mean,
you're also
it's pretty
not
sketchy.
Saying it's the
like,
case.
In what other, yeah, exactly. It's just like, I don't know what the case is, but, like, to ask for payment to do their job, you're like, wait, what the fuck? What the fuck is that?
Sorry, did you just ask for money?
Could you imagine our mom goes missing, we call up the police, and they're like, yeah, like, you give us 10 grand, and we might look into that for you.
I'd be like, sorry, Mom. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. I love our mom very much.
No, but, like, if you actually didn't have that money, right, you're like, literally, Mom, sorry.
Yeah, like,
I love you, but,
what,
like,
what am I to do?
I can't afford the police to look into you missing.
Exactly.
Like, my poor mama.
You shall be missing until I get 10 grand.
Yeah.
like, not even a ransom, just, like, the police. I can't
right?
pay them.
Like, it's a weird scenario here.
Yeah. Okay, so in this scenario, Bev, Kennerika and Mitra
our poor mother.
Yeah.
Our poor mother, Becky.
If you're listening, Mom, we love you a lot.
We do.
Yeah. We would do anything we could to find you.
And raise that money ASAP.
Yeah. GoFundMe, what?
Yeah. Oh,
okay. So Mitra and Kennerika, they didn't have the money to bribe the
Classic.
police. To be clear, we're only laughing because what we said about our mom.
Yeah. And then it's like, that's the next sentence.
Yeah.
Like.
So Mitra, as I said earlier, she was a retired janitor and she had money to live, but it wasn't an extravagant lifestyle. And so also to put that in perspective, if she had left on her own accord, she didn't really have like the money to just, start a new life somewhere else.
Right.
Because it's not cheap to do that. So Kennerika felt pretty helpless at this point, that the police weren't doing anything to find her mom, and she was worried. So she actually reached out to a neighbor named Vlado Taneski. Now, Vlado was well known in the neighborhood, and like many others, he grew up there. Him and his mother knew Mitra fairly well. Vlado's mother and Mitra were both janitors in the area before they retired. And you might be asking, why did Kennerika reach out to Vlado, her just neighbor?
Yeah.
Well, Vlado was once a reporter with the New Macedonia local newspaper, but now he was a freelance writer for several newspapers. So she was really hoping that Vlado could help get the word out about her mother's disappearance. And after speaking with Kennerika, Vlado was more than happy to write this article. So this article brought awareness to Mitra's disappearance, but unfortunately it didn't bring in any leads. Now, over the next few months, Vlado did as much as he could to figure out what happened to Mitra. He interviewed neighbors, friends, and family members, but nothing. However, 2 months after Mitra went missing, on January 12, 2005, a scrap collector was rummaging near an abandoned sports center when he noticed a large bag that was thrown out in a hole at the base of a steel column. So it's kind of like, hidden away. But he was rummaging, so he saw it and found it. There were stones and garbage piled on top of it. He became very curious, and when he cleared the debris off of it, and opened it up, he was flabbergasted. He was so shocked, Bev. He found a naked woman. She had been wrapped in a transparent plastic-like material tied with a telephone cord.
Awful.
He could see that her legs were tied together with another telephone cord. So the man obviously called the police, and the woman was identified as 64-year-old Mitra Simonoska. After her autopsy, it was revealed that she had been severely beaten, repeatedly sexually assaulted, tortured, and strangled. The medical examiner concluded Mitra had only been dead for 10 days, though.
Oh my gosh. This is months after.
Mm-hmm. She went missing. 2 months. Which means that she was held captive for 47 days before she was murdered.
This is so sad, particularly for like what we know about the police and their lack of, involvement right from the get.
Yep.
It's like if they had done something, this poor woman could have potentially
been saved.
Oh my God, that's really sad. And just like the manner of her death is really
brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So now the police were definitely paying attention.
You'd hope.
And because of the level of brutality of this crime, the police turned their attention to another murder that had happened in a neighboring village 12 days before Mitra had been found. So on December 31st, Radislav Badanovsky had been home alone when two men, Ante Rostesky and Igor Merchesky, broke into his home. These two men were in their 20s. They were high as can be on drugs, and initially they had only broken in to rob his home. But while they were there, they decided to sexually torture and kill him. And these men, they went, above just, a brutal murder. They forced objects into Radislav's anus, and they squeezed his dick and balls with hot fire tongs, and then beat him to death.
Wow.
So brutal, right?
Yeah.
So you can see why the police were like, hey, I wonder if these guys killed Mitra.
Well, the brutality alone might make them think they were related, right?
Exactly. And on top of it, these men, when they left Radislav's home, they actually only left with a couple coins, so it was like their haul wasn't even big.
That was the main purpose. They went in and now a man's dead.
Yeah, and they got, they left with nothing. Not that stealing stuff is worth, killing someone, but,
But to top it off, right?
Yeah, he didn't have much for them to take.
They did it for nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the two men were suspected of Radislav's murder rather quickly, and on top of the brutality, the police thought they were connected because of Radislav's age and Mitra's age. They were both seniors. So Igor and Ante were brought in for questioning, and they confessed to killing Radislav. They were questioned, they're like, yep, we did it. Here are the details. They didn't
try and hide anything.
Yeah. They had been able to tell the police specific details about that crime that only the killers would have known. But when they were questioned about Mitra, they denied anything to do with that crime. But eventually, after hours of interrogation, both men confessed to killing her. So they were ultimately charged with the murder of Radislav and Mitra. But it wasn't long after their initial confession to Mitra's death that both men tried to recant their confessions. Both Ante and Igor claimed that they were tortured by the police until they finally confessed to killing Mitra. Which, Bev, why? My question would be, as police, why would they confess to Radislav's murder and not Mitra's?
Yeah, it's already a done deal. You've committed the most heinous crime you could probably commit. So what would it hurt you to also admit to the secondary one? It doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show that, hours of interrogation can lead to false confessions from people.
Mm-hmm.
If that's in fact what happened.
Based on their account, it was. So, yeah. So, regardless of the men trying to take back their confession, the prosecution decided to go ahead with both charges and go to trial. This case was highly publicized in the media, and everyone throughout Macedonia knew about this case. And this was greatly attributed to Vlado's investigation and writing skills. Eventually, Ante and Igor were both found guilty for both the murders by the judge presiding over this case. And for the next couple years, there were no more savage crimes in Macedonia like that. So they thought they caught their killers. But in November of 2007, another janitor from the same neighborhood as Mitra vanished. It was 56-year-old Lubica Likoska. She was a kind and quiet woman, and in early November, she left to go to the market and get food for lunch.
Eerie, similar to Mitra.
Very. But by that evening, when she hadn't returned home, her son Dugo became very concerned. He called her friends, family, and no one had seen or knew where she was. For the next 2 days, Dugo searched for his mother, and there was no trace of her. He eventually called the police. She was known as a reliable woman. She had been working as a janitor for several apartment complexes, and she didn't even show up for work. So you think that would have really
alarm bells going off
to the
police.
Yeah.
But is there a but, Becky?
A little bit. And the reason why is so Dugo did go to the police, but he was so worried with how they handled Mitra's murder that he went straight to Vlado as well.
Interesting.
And the police didn't do a ton either. So it was good that he did that. Now, Dugo asked he asked Vlado if he gave him an interview, would he write about his mother's case? And again, Vlado agreed. His article was put in the New Macedonian paper, and for the next few months, Dugo worked with Vlado to keep his mother's case in the public eye. 3 months passed, and on February 3rd, 2008, a truck driver stopped on the side of a road to pee. While doing his business, he noticed a hand sticking out of a bunch of garbage in the ditch. And when he went to look, it was a woman. She was naked and wrapped in transparent plastic-like material with phone cords tied around it. Her legs were also bound with the same type of telephone cord. Now, he called the police, and when they did her autopsy, it was noted that she had been severely beaten, tortured, sexually assaulted, and it was 56-year-old Lubica. The medical examiner said that she died by strangulation, and that she too had only been dead for a couple of days before she was found. So that means, Bev, that she was held captive for almost 3 months.
Oh, same old song and dance here.
Well, exactly.
And now it's really looking like Mitra was not killed by those 2 thieves.
Exactly.
Yikes. And now we got a serial killer on the loose, everyone. Right? Same MO.
Oh, yeah.
Almost to the T.
Yeah, it's the only difference is that there are 2 different women. Everything else is pretty much the same. So this murder captivated the whole nation. What really stood out was the raging similarities, like you said, to Mitra's murder. But how could that be? After all, Ante and Igor were sitting in prison, right?
Right.
So Vlado followed this case closely and continued to write articles for the public to see. He openly criticized the police for their shoddy work in handling these cases. He wrote an article called A Serial Killer Stalks Kicevo, noting the similarities between Mitra and Lubica's death, as well as a missing woman named Gorica Pavleska, which I haven't said that name yet, and the police had not been investigating her at all. So this was news to everyone.
But Vlado knew of her, maybe from his his journalism, basically.
Exactly. And he said that in May of 2003, Gorica had gone missing. She lived in the same neighborhood as Mitra and Lubica. She was a retired janitor. She was 73 at the time and had lived alone. When she went missing, Gorica didn't have any family in Kicevo. People around her speculated that she could have moved to the capital and just didn't tell anyone. Or maybe she went out towards the woods and just died in the wilderness of something natural, heart attack or stroke or something. But because she didn't have any family in the area, there was no one there to advocate for her and her disappearance. So it just got swept under the rug.
But was she found, her body?
Gorica, no. She was never found, Bev.
So Vlado is just going out on a limb here, being is she, the similarities of where they lived and their job title made him connect the dots, basically.
Exactly. So because of this article, everyone started to believe that Mitra, Lubica, and Gorica's disappearances and murders were all connected. And who wouldn't think that?
Yeah.
Right? In Vlado's article on February 6th, in the Morning Herald, he wrote, "Rumors abound. While the police are working on this case, the majority of people in Kicevo think this murder is related to the double homicide from 2004 of Mitra and Radislav." He speculated in this article about the circumstances of how Lubica could have been abducted, and he wrote, "Could she have been hit by a car? And instead of taking her to the hospital, the driver decided to take advantage of her in the most hideous manner." So this was his speculation in the newspaper, Bev. Isn't that weird?
It is kind of weird.
Yeah. Well, despite these articles, the police still did not believe that these cases were related, and they believed that their perps were sitting in jail. Like, I don't know, like, how obvious you gotta be to, like, not think that.
Yeah, I don't know. Unless they think it's like, you know, like a copycat killer, potentially, for the second.
Sure.
But I agree with you. I mean, I'm reaching.
Yeah, you're like, I'm trying to give them some, like, minor validation as to why they were so neglectful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple months later, on May 7th, 2008, 65-year-old Zavana this one's tough, Temolkoska, another retired janitor from an elementary school, had gone missing. Zavana shared an apartment with her son Zoran in the same neighborhood as Mitra and Lubica. And that evening, Zavana got a phone call from a friend saying that she just heard on the local radio station that Zoran had been hit by a car and was taken to the hospital. Obviously, Zavana was so concerned and distraught that she ran out of her apartment and headed directly towards the hospital. What's weird about this was Zoran was not in the hospital. He had not been hit by a car. In fact, he had arrived home just a little while later in that evening to an empty apartment. His mother was nowhere to be found. This was not like her. So Zoran went to some of his neighbors to see if they knew where his mom was. That's when he was informed that they had heard this radio report of him being hit by a car and going to the hospital. Obviously, the situation was really fishy and caused Zoran a lot of concern. So he called the police, and they actually had no records of any accidents that evening at all. So the question was, who would have called the radio station with that report? Like, isn't that weird, Bev?
It is very weird.
Yeah.
It's also just, like, weird that the exact thing that Vlado wrote in his article about the potential way that, like, these women were getting abducted is eerily similar to this, like, radio report.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's her son and not her, but it's just, like...
It's weird.
It is weird.
Yeah, I agree. And it was, like, so specific. Like, why would anyone write that? As, like, just a guess, basically.
Yeah, and then have this happen? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
So, these circumstances, Bev, obviously major cause for concern, and this, like, woke the police up. They took it very seriously, and they started calling Zavana's cell phone several times, and there was no answer, and they began searching for her. Now, the following day, the police tried Zavana's cell phone again, and to their surprise, a woman actually answered. And the woman explained that she'd been walking near a kindergarten when she heard a weird sound, and it was Zavana's cell phone ringing, and she decided to pick it up and answer it. The police believed that based on the location of the phone near the school, they believed it had been thrown out of a moving vehicle. Now, they had no evidence to support that, other than just what it kind of looked like could have happened. So, then 9 days later, on May 16th, Zavana was found murdered. Her body had been found laying on top of a pile of garbage outside of town in an open field. And again, she was wrapped in the same transparent plastic material that Mitra and Lubica had been wrapped in, with cords tied around it. Now, there was a bit of a difference with Zavana. Her head and neck was wrapped multiple times with a nightgown type of clothing. It was dark green with small white polka dots, and it was determined that it was not her nightgown. She was stabbed in the skull 13 times. 5 of her ribs were broken. Now, the medical examiner speculated that her killer had knelt on her chest while she was strangled, and that's how those ribs broke. In the transparent sheet, there was pools of Zavana's blood. There was also semen found in her vagina, along with an aftershave bottle. In her rectum, there were medical bandages, gauze, cotton, wool, and pieces of wood. There was also signs that she was sodomized with a glass bottle. Next to her body, there was a jersey shirt that was soaked in blood. Now, the police believed or hoped it was from the killer and not just some random blood-soaked shirt. Which I kind of laugh at that because it's like, that would be really random to have just another blood-soaked shirt next to someone murdered.
I mean, yeah, but it could be Zavana's blood.
That is true.
So they're definitely hoping that this is potential DNA evidence.
Yes. They also found 7 hairs on her body that had the roots attached to it. So, there's DNA that can be taken from that. The medical examiner concluded she had been murdered less than 24 hours after she was taken, which is slightly different from the other two women, right?
Yeah, who had been tortured for months.
Exactly. After Savannah's murder, it was undeniable that there was a serial killer in the area of Kicevo. Vlado continued to report and inform the public of these murders. In one of his articles, he was the first to name the serial killer as the Kicevo monster. He also released an article in the New Macedonia paper stating that the people of Kicevo live in fear and panic after another butchered body of a woman from the town was found this weekend. The local police and citizens see the mysterious disappearance and hideous deaths of Savannah and Ljubica as an act of the same man, a serial killer. Police sources confirm the existence of a serial killer in the town based on the fact that the women were tortured and killed in the same way, which eliminates the possibility that this was done by multiple people.
It also, I agree with that, but I guess I'm just thinking a little bit on a different page here than that. It does seem like the killer is ramping up his tactics or her tactics. I don't really know who did it. But you know how they say as the killers progress in their killings, oftentimes the brutality or the manner of death can increase in its savageness.
Yes.
It seems like that's what's happening.
Yeah, this one seems like she died faster.
Yeah. Her ribs were broken. Stabbed multiple times in the head.
The nightgown around her head and neck. Yeah, there's just a little more to it.
Exactly.
He also says the massacred body of Savannah Temolkowska was wrapped in a transparent nylon bag tied with a telephone cable, which was previously used to strangle the poor woman. The corpse was given to the medical examiner who determined Savannah was severely beaten, mutilated, and strangled. According to the autopsy, she was murdered the same day she disappeared. So that's everything that Vlado wrote. Pretty detailed, I would say, for a newspaper article. Seems like, maybe I'm wrong, intense for the public to read. But maybe not. So believing that Ljubica and Savannah were killed by the same person, it would only make sense that Mitra was as well. All three murders were almost identical, therefore Igor and Ante's charges were re-examined. There was only evidence that could prove they killed Radoslav, but it was revealed that the prosecution in that case had actual seminal DNA evidence that was found inside Mitra's body, and it did not match either Igor or Ante, and this evidence had not been disclosed to their defense lawyer or the courts.
Yikes.
Can you believe that? That's
I can.
DNA is some of the strongest evidence.
I know, but if you really think of how they went about getting those confessions, it makes sense that they would want to sweep that under the rug.
No, we didn't torture them into confessing. No, we do not have DNA proving their innocence.
But no, I on the flip side, I really, just as a listener, cannot believe that.
Yeah,
that is crucial evidence.
Bull crap.
It is bull crap. At least they're re-examining it as in relation to those other murders.
Exactly. Now, unfortunately, nothing was done about this for a while, but eventually Igor and Ante were acquitted of murder charges for Mitra's death. So they still killed Radoslav. That was
clear as day.
Yeah, they're we take responsibility. So they're still in jail for a long time because they were also horrible, regardless of not killing Mitra. So at that point, the police had no clue who the killer was. And with mounting pressure on the police department to stop this psycho, they reached out for a forensic profile of their suspect. It was believed the perp would be a middle-aged male, relatively strong, above average intelligence, deep-seated sexual frustrations from early childhood or youth, which had grown into sadomasochistic desires. Most likely, he acted alone, but they couldn't be 100% certain he didn't use an accomplice. He would be local and knew all his victims.
Interesting.
So not long after they got that forensic profile, they were able to get a male blood type sample from the jersey shirt found beside Savannah's body. They also interviewed over 150 men that matched the forensic profile. From that 150, they were able to narrow down their search to 15 different men, and that included a local taxi driver and a bunch of Savannah's neighbors. All of those 15 men agreed to give their blood for testing, and while waiting for the results, the police also surveilled a bunch of them just to see, if anyone was going to kill anyone. you know? Nothing came from that surveillance. Now, after they compared all the blood that was given from the 15 different men to the seminal DNA samples from Savannah, only one man matched.
Whoa.
Yes. So on June 20th at 3 p.m., police arrested a 56-year-old man, local man, for the murder of Savannah and Lubitsa. Now, the word that someone was arrested spread really quickly around town, but no one knew who this man was. So the editor of the New Macedonia paper called Vlado to get the scoop. You know, he was in the know about everything.
Yeah, he was the #1 reporter on this.
But unfortunately, Vlado didn't answer the calls. And the editor called again and again with no response. Now, Bev, you're pretty, smart, and you seem to put things together really well.
Thank you.
Now, do you know why Vlado wasn't calling the editor back?
Well, I could only assume for one reason, Becky. It was Vlado's DNA that matched.
Bingo.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Vlado had been arrested for the murder of Lubitsa and Savannah.
That is fucked up right there.
I know. Now, what's really interesting is that before the DNA sample came back to the police, they actually already started to zone in on Vlado. You see, after one of his last published articles, he had written that Savannah had been bound with the same telephone cord that she had been strangled with, right?
But wasn't in the reports, right? Like, was it? Because I remember, like, I don't know, remember how he said it was, like, so different and the nightgown was wrapped around her head, she was stabbed a bunch of times, but, like, I feel like that detail, like, even when you had said it, I was kind of wondering, because I was like, that telephone cord bit is also missing.
Yeah. Well, there was a telephone cord still wrapped around the transparent material, and her feet were bound, but they had not given that information out.
Although that was around her neck.
Yeah, and although that is what they investigated and believed, it was something they withheld from the public. And at first they thought, when they read it in the article, they thought, oh, like maybe someone in the department leaked this information. But, they investigated that and no one had done that. Then they thought, oh, it must be one of Vlado's sources. And so they go to Vlado and say, hey, dude, what's your source? And he would just say, oh, friends, family, but he wouldn't tell anyone specifically who gave him that information. Once they realized, like, he seemed a little sketchy, they actually brought him in for questioning several times. But this information was kept from the public, and Vlado kept that to himself. So no one had any idea that he was even remotely a suspect. What really also tipped the police off was in those interrogations or little questioning sessions, when they asked Vlado, like, do you know these women? He actually said he didn't know the victims. But the police knew that that wasn't true. They already knew that he and all the women had been neighbors for a really long time and that they were friends of his mother's. They were all in that janitorial community.
Right.
So it's like, why are you lying about that?
Why would they go to Vlado if they didn't know him?
Exactly. That was the whole reason why the, like, children of these missing women went to him for help.
Yeah.
Right? And so when he lied about not knowing the victims, like I said, that's when they were like, he's hiding something. And then when the DNA profile came back, he was at the top of the list right there. So, boo Vlado.
Dang. Like, when you really think of his involvement in these cases, like, I don't know, it's pretty sick. You know how a lot of serial killers, like, they taunt the police or they want notoriety for their killings, I guess. They might, like, send letters to the police or what have you. Like, this guy was full on reporting his crimes.
Yeah, he, like, re-involved himself.
But, like, he must have got some gratification from, like, literally rewriting what he had done to these women.
Surely he must have.
And then he also gave his own serial killer, like, name.
I know.
Like, that's sick and twisted, bro.
Isn't it?
And then when you really think of, I don't know how he speculated how they were abducted, like, oh my God.
Like, is he actually just telling what he did?
I would honestly think so.
I surely wouldn't. I don't think he's necessarily speculating anything now.
No, surely he was the one who called the radio station.
Surely he was.
Like, holy crap.
I know. It's insane, isn't it?
He wanted to lure his victim out of her home.
Yeah.
Ew.
He's the worst, isn't he?
Yeah, so who is Vlado, Becky?
Well,
who is this sicko?
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about him, okay?
Okay.
Vlado Tedeschi, he was born in 1952 in Kicevo. He was the second of 3 children.
Oh, God. The middle child. Do you see how quickly I put that
I did,
together?
Yeah. You know, I wasn't going to say anything, or it wasn't even at, like, the forefront of my brain.
Yeah, right.
But you said it.
If you guys don't know, I am the middle child, and I have gotten, I don't know, I'm like the classic middle child syndrome. I was like the problem child growing up.
She was.
So, I mean,
yeah,
there's something to be said about the second born.
Yeah, like
Bev, of three. It has to be of 3.
Of course. Like Bev could have literally made that stereotype on her own for sure, right?
I was one decision away from being a serial killer.
Oh my God.
Just kidding. Am I?
She's like maybe 5.
No. But like, whoa.
I know.
Anyways, I digress.
So yes, he was second of 3 children. Both of his parents were disciplinarians. His father had fought in World War II, and Vlado had a really tense relationship with his mother. Although I don't actually know the details of what that relationship truly looked like. He just had a really tense relationship, so I can't imagine it was great. So after studying journalism in Croatia, he became really interested in poetry and writing. And at a pretty young age, 21, he met a law student named Vesna, who he fell in love with and married. After they wed, Vesna moved into Vlado's parents' house. Vlado lived there his whole life. Vlado and Vesna raised 2 kids there. Their eldest son had similar interests to Vlado. He was a poet, an academic linguistic who lived in Slovakia. Their youngest boy was a doctor in the Macedonian army. So they raised some good kids, you know?
Seems like it.
So throughout Vlado's life, his family also owned a very secluded cottage 5 kilometers outside of Kičevo. In his later years, Vlado's father spent most of his time in this cottage alone, raising goats and doing some gardening. That is until he died. It's believed that Vlado's father committed suicide by hanging in that cottage in 2002. And in December of 2002, 4 months later, Vlado's mother died by an accidental overdose with sleeping pills. So he lost both parents within 4 months. That must have been so sad and really hard on him. Then in early 2003, Vlado got laid off from the Macedonian newspaper. This was devastating to him because he really loved his job. We know he was very passionate about writing, right? And this was a huge hit to the family's finances. And in order to make ends meet, Vesna took a promotion from the Ministry of Interior, which I don't actually know what that is, but she was a lawyer, so I assume something to do with that. Financially, this was a good move for Vlado and Vesna, but it forced her to move to Skopje, the capital, which was 2 hours away from Kicevo. Now, being married for almost 30 years at that point, it was a pretty hard transition. They ended up buying a little apartment for Vesna to live in, and Vlado and Vesna would take turns traveling to see one another. But for the most part, Vlado was all alone by then because his sons were out of the picture, different cities, and he spent a ton of time in the family's cottage.
So why didn't he move with her, I wonder?
That's a really good question. I have no idea. I would have probably just moved.
Maybe he wanted to keep the family home.
Maybe.
Who knows, but...
you can still keep a home and not live there.
True that.
But I don't really know. By then, the family's cottage was pretty run down. It was small, and it had a cellar-like basement.
Creepy!
Yeah.
Just knowing that he becomes a serial killer. Super creepy.
Yeah, exactly.
Was that where those women were tortured? It makes you wonder.
It does, doesn't it?
Yes.
So eventually, when Vesna got the news about her husband, Bev, she was so confused. She had only known him as a loving, caring husband. Vesna later stated that the only time she ever saw Vlado angry and a little aggressive was with his parents, who, through his life, we know were pretty strict. They were a little temperamental and disciplinarians. So he obviously had a bit of a strained relationship there. Okay, so now after Vlado was arrested, he was questioned about the murders. He gave very vague answers, he didn't remember things, which I found pretty odd because of his detailed articles in the newspaper.
No doubt.
Right? He gave more information in the newspaper articles than he did while being questioned. So they're like, okay, guy, this is stupid. Anyways, he was given a public defender for his case. He was taken to Kicevo jail and booked. He was deemed to be in good physical and mental health. I mean, I don't know about that, but they deemed him to be well. Now, typically inmates who commit such brutal crimes would have their own cell there. But the jail was overcrowded, and Vlado was booked into a cell with 3 other inmates. 2 of the prisoners were men in their 20s and charged with voter fraud from a recent election. The third male was a 39-year-old who was facing a murder trial for poisoning and murdering a 14-year-old girl. Now, let's set the scene. In their cell, there were 2 bunk beds, a bathroom that was blocked off with like an accordion door type, and in the bathroom was a toilet, sink, and a bucket of water. You see, at the time, there was a water shortage, and the water was to be rationed. So the prisoners had been given bottles of water to drink throughout the day, and then in their cells, they had this bucket of water to share for all their other water needs, like brushing their teeth, I guess a little bird bath, stuff like that. Now, the first 3 days that Vlado was in jail, they seemed pretty routine, but at 1:50 a.m. Monday morning, one of Vlado's cellmates woke up to running water in the bathroom. He got up to shut it off, but when he went into the makeshift bathroom, he started screaming for the guards. When the guards came in, they saw Vlado on his knees with his head in the bucket, and he was dead. He had killed himself. His autopsy showed that he had died of drowning. There was a single bruise found on his forehead, and when people heard about this, there were theories that Vlado had been murdered. After all, how does someone intentionally drown themselves? It definitely doesn't seem like the most common way to go about that.
That's fair, because drowning is so brutal. Like, you have this urge to remove yourself from, gasping in water and drowning.
Yeah. It's just like a autonomic almost.
Response is to take yourself out of the water, right?
Right. So to just complete it is that's a hard one for people to kind of believe, I think. But the medical examiner concluded the bruise was consistent with hitting his head on the bottom of the bucket while he convulsed involuntarily throughout his drowning. He had no defensive wounds or any other injuries, so his death was deemed a suicide.
So he was trying desperately to keep his head underwater as this autonomic response was trying to get him out.
Exactly.
Wow.
So when they checked Vlado's pockets, they found a handwritten note in his pocket. The note led them to a second note under his pillow. And in Vlado's handwriting, it said, "I'm proud of my family, and I love them very much. I have not done any of the things I am accused of. I did not commit these murders." Now, because Vlado was dead, he could not be found guilty for any of these crimes. But 3 separate labs individually matched the DNA in Mitra Zavana to Vlado. The hairs on Lubica matched Vlado's DNA. At Vlado's family cottage, they found more evidence. They found, I don't know if this is evidence or just to show where his mind was at, but they found a bunch of hardcore porn, ropes and cords similar to what the women were bound with. They found shoes and clothes that belonged to the victims. The green nightgown with polka dots that was wrapped around Lubica's head and neck belonged to Vlado's mother.
My God.
So there was a ton of evidence tying Vlado to all 3 murders.
Yeah, he honestly took the cowardly way out and almost wanted to save face for his family.
Exactly.
Which I don't doubt that he did love his family.
100%. Don't doubt that.
He's also a sick and twisted motherfucker.
Exactly.
Literally. Sorry.
So the one thing that was still up in the air was, how did he take all these women? So again, they looked to Vlado's articles where he wrote, "Lubica could have been abducted. Could she have been hit by a car, and instead of taking her to the hospital, the driver decided to take advantage of her in the most hideous manner?" So looking back on this quote, they believe that Vlado lured the women into his car or maybe hit them and, made them
incapacitated in some way, offering a helping hand. Of course, they would have known him too.
Yeah. So it's really innocent or an accident, right? So after he hit or lured them into his car, he took them to his family's cottage where he held these women captive and raped and tortured them over and over and over again. The police believed that there was a high chance that he actually dressed these women in his mother's clothes, believing that maybe he had some deep-rooted issues with his mother after all. These women had the same occupation, were around the same age and economic status as his mother when she died. So it's not a far reach to think that. Also, to look back, it was only months after Vlado's mother's death that Gorica, the 73-year-old woman Vlado wrote about, went missing. Now, to be clear, she has never been found, and her disappearance has never been formally connected to Vlado.
However, him writing about her was all but a fucking confession. Let's be real.
Yeah, like, we can assume that.
This is creepy.
I know. So, ultimately, there's no real conclusion for the families of these murdered women because Vlado is dead. But
yeah, he took the cowardly way out, hey?
He really did.
Like, declared his innocence and then killed himself.
Yeah.
Like,
sure.
I don't enjoy that. Yeah,
No.
that must be just like a slap in the face for these family members.
Exactly. But the only good thing is how much evidence they have against him.
So they know really without a shadow of a doubt that he was the one, right?
Yeah, like, you can deny this all you want, but the evidence looks really shitty. So, you know, go forward with that, I guess.
Yes.
Now, Vesna, you know, all she knew was this loving husband. And so she fully supports her husband's innocence, even to this day. The Vlado that she knew just wasn't capable of these heinous crimes. And like we said, the evidence says otherwise. There does continue to be controversy around Vlado's death. Was it suicide or was it murder? But most people believe that after Vlado was shown all the evidence connecting him to these crimes, that he decided to kill himself so that his family wouldn't have to see the evidence and see who he really was, the Kicevo monster.
Absolutely. I mean, the notes to me that he left behind honestly does point more to suicide than a murder.
For sure. Like, what, you know, like, sitting there, what are the actual chances that you would write those notes and then get murdered in a bucket?
Yeah.
Like, I don't... yeah, I just...
No, there's, like, overwhelming evidence to not only his suicide, but also his involvement in these crimes. And my God, you know, like, I don't know the psychology and everything behind what the fuck was going on with this, but I was going to ask you, like, if you hadn't mentioned it, I wanted to see how long it was after his parents' death that these crimes started to be committed. Because, like, as you had said, he lost both his parents in such a short span of time, right? He lived with them really his whole life, raised his family around them. Like, they obviously, even if there was a troubled past,
they were a huge part of his life.
Right. So it would be traumatizing. It's like a triggering event almost, right?
Exactly.
So...
yeah, it was just a couple months before the first woman went missing, so.
Wow, Becky.
I know. Well, I know that I feel like we're both kind of just sitting here, like, taking it all in, like, holy shit, this was a lot.
It was a lot.
It was a lot, but.
I can't help but recognize the striking similarities to, like, this case and the Gilgo murders. If you guys have not watched the documentary on Netflix about the Gilgo murders, you should take a look because I had seen that case years ago, but there was no resolution.
Yeah.
No murderer was found at the time. But as of today, there are updates in this case, and that's why it's worth the watch. But in the case of, like, who ends up being the murderer, like, he lived in his family home his whole life, you know what I mean? Had issues with both parents, or at least his dad for sure. And it's just, like, it's just a weird resemblance as we both, like, decided to watch that documentary on Netflix, and then you're telling me about this case.
Yeah.
It's like, what the
like,
fuck?
how did this timeline come about for us?
Yeah, like, that was weird. But anyways.
Man, people are fucked up.
People are fucked up.
Jeez, that's all I can say. And if any of these victims' families are listening, like, we just feel so bad for you and what you went through, and that the police didn't really take it seriously, and that you had to unknowingly go to your mother's murderer to document this goddamn case.
Yeah.
What an absolute fucking psychopath.
While their mothers were alive, except for Savannah, but, like,
yeah. Like,
while their mothers were still alive, probably in his basement, you know?
Yeah.
In his creepy cellar of a basement.
Like, that's
I don't know.
Twisted.
It is
That's
super twisted.
Oh, gross. All right, Bev. Well, that is the case of the Kicevo monster. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing. And just your weekly reminder to download our weekly episodes, follow us on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, and give us a follow on our social medias. You can find us at Luminol on the Wall. Can't wait till next week.